My mom asked, "Why don't you ever come visit anymore?" So I walked her around the house, pointed at every wall covered with my brother's photos, and replied, "Because I've always felt like a guest here. I'm 29, and I grew up believing that love was something you had to earn in my family. Not in the cute motivational poster way where hard work builds character. I mean, I literally thought that if I just tried a little harder, got a little better, maybe one day my parents would look at me the way they looked at my brother Connor. Spoiler alert, they never did. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I grew up in a mid-sized town in Ohio. Nice enough place. Good schools, Friday night football, the kind of neighborhood where people wave at you from their porches. My parents, Greg and Diane, were high school sweethearts who got married at 22 and had Connor a year later. Connor was the golden child from the second he took his first breath. I'm not exaggerating. My mom has told the story of Connor's birth probably 400 times. How the nurse said he was the most alert newborn she'd ever seen. How he smiled at 2 weeks old. How he shark tooth grabbed onto her finger, and she just knew he was going to do something great. I came along 3 years later. You want to know what my birth story is? My mom went into labor during Connor's first t-ball game. She was upset because she missed him batting. That's it. That's my origin story. I entered this world as a scheduling inconvenience. Now look, I don't want to sound like I'm throwing myself a pity party here. I had a roof over my head, food on the table, shoes on my feet. I wasn't neglected in the way that gets social services called. It was subtler than that. It was the kind of thing where if you pointed it out, people would tell you that you were being too sensitive. And trust me, I heard that phrase a lot. Connor played baseball, so my parents never missed a single game. They had matching team shirts. They kept a stats book. My dad built a batting cage in the backyard. When I joined the swim team in 7th grade, my mom came to exactly 2 meets. Both times she spent the entire meet on the phone in the bleachers. When I placed 3rd at regionals my freshman year, I remember walking out of the pool area with my bronze medal dripping wet, scanning the parking lot. Her car wasn't even there. She'd left early because Connor had a dentist appointment. A dentist appointment, not emergency surgery, a routine cleaning. My dad wasn't much better, just quieter about it. Greg was the kind of father who showed love through presence, and he was present for Connor. He coached Connor's teams. He helped Connor with homework at the kitchen table every night. He took Connor fishing on weekends. With me, it was more like, "Hey Liam, there's leftover pizza in the fridge," which honestly, free pizza is great, but it's not exactly father-son bonding. The thing is, Connor wasn't even a bad guy growing up. He wasn't some arrogant bully rubbing it in my face. He was just oblivious. He didn't notice the imbalance because why would he? When you're the son, you don't think about what it's like to be standing in the shade. He'd come home with another trophy, and my parents would clear a spot on the mantle, and I'd be sitting there with my report card that had straight A's, and nobody would even ask to see it. I tried everything. I really did. I got good grades because I thought maybe academics was my lane. Nope. Connor got B's and C's, and my parents threw him a party when he pulled his GPA up to a 3.0. I got a 4.2 weighted GPA, and my mom said, and I quote, "That's nice, honey. Can you set the table?" I joined every extracurricular I could. Debate team, student government, volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends. My dad once forgot I was on student council and asked me why I was getting home late from school like I was out causing trouble. By the time I graduated high school, I'd basically accepted my role. I was the background character in the Connor show. Connor went to college on a partial baseball scholarship. My parents drove him to campus, helped him move in, cried in the parking lot, took 800 photos. When it was my turn, a couple years later, my mom handed me a check and said, "Good luck, we'll visit soon." They visited once my sophomore year for 2 hours because they were passing through on their way to see Connor play in a tournament 3 states over. I wish I could tell you I had some big dramatic confrontation during college. I didn't. I just quietly built a life. I studied finance, interned at a firm in Columbus, made a few good friends who actually remembered my birthday without a Facebook reminder. I started to realize that the hole in my chest wasn't because something was wrong with me. It was because the people who were supposed to fill it just never bothered. After college, I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, got a job at a financial consulting firm. Nothing glamorous at first, just entry-level number crunching, but I was good at it, really good. Turns out, when you spend your whole childhood being invisible, you develop this laser focus because you've got nothing else competing for your attention. No family drama pulling you home for holidays, no parents calling to check in, just me, my apartment, and a career I was determined to build into something. Connor, meanwhile, stayed close to home, got married to his college girlfriend, Ashley, at 25, had a kid by 27, another by 29. He became a high school baseball coach, which my parents treated like he'd been appointed to the Supreme Court. Every Sunday dinner conversation was about Connor's team, Connor's kids, Connor's new house that was only 20 minutes from Mom and Dad's place. I know this because on the rare occasion my mom did call me, she'd spend 45 minutes talking about Connor before asking how I was doing. And by then, I could hear my dad in the background saying dinner's ready, so the call would end. I home for Christmas when I was 26. It had been about a year since my last visit. I walked into my parents' house and something hit me that I'd never fully registered before. Connor's family photos lined the hallway. His wedding portrait hung above the fireplace. His kids' drawings were taped to the fridge. His son's report card was pinned to the corkboard in the kitchen with a gold star sticker my mom had added herself. There was a whole shrine to Connor's life in every room of that house. I walked through every room like a tourist in a museum. Living room Connor's trophies, hallway Connor's family, kitchen Connor's kids' art projects, bathroom somehow even a photo of Connor's family at the beach was framed above the towel rack. I went upstairs to what used to be my bedroom. It was a craft room now, my bed was gone, my posters were gone, there was a sewing machine where my desk used to be. Connor's old room across the hall preserved exactly as he left it. Baseball pennants on the wall, his varsity jacket still hanging on the back of the door. I stood in that craft room for a long time. Something shifted inside me. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally stop trying to see something that isn't there. I went back downstairs and my mom was in the kitchen arranging cookies on a plate, and she looked up and smiled and said, "Oh good, Liam. Can you carry these to the living room?" And I realized she hadn't even noticed I'd been gone for 20 minutes exploring the house. She didn't ask what I'd been doing. She didn't ask how my drive was. She needed a pair of hands to carry a plate. That Christmas was the last time I visited for a while. Not because of some dramatic blow-up. I just stopped making the effort. And here's the thing that confirmed everything I already knew. It took my parents 4 months to notice. 4 months. That's how long it took for my mother to call and say, "Hey, we haven't heard from you in a while." And even then, it wasn't because she missed me. It was because Connor's son had a birthday party coming up, and she wanted to know if I could send a gift, not come to the party. Send a gift like I was some distant relative. They kept on a mailing list. I sent the gift because I'm not going to take out my frustration on a 5-year-old who doesn't know any better, but I didn't call back. I let the silence sit and waited to see how long it would take before someone reached out just to talk to me. Not to ask for something, not to relay Connor news, just to say, "Hey Liam, how's your life going?" 7 more weeks. My dad finally called on a Tuesday evening. He asked how work was, asked if I was seeing anyone, then hit me with the real reason. "Your mom wants to know if you're coming home for Easter." Not your mom, and I want to know, your mom wants to know, like he was just the messenger. I didn't go. Life in Charlotte was actually going well. I'd been promoted twice in 3 years. My boss, a guy named Scott, had taken me under his wing and was pushing me toward a senior analyst role. I had a solid group of friends. I'd started dating a woman named Claire who I'd met at a charity event through work. She was an occupational therapist, wickedly smart, laughed at my terrible jokes, and had this way of looking at me when I talked that made me feel like what I was saying actually mattered. It was a foreign sensation, honestly, having someone genuinely interested in the details of my day. Claire knew about my family situation. I told her early on because I figured if it was going to scare her off, better to find out sooner rather than later. She didn't run. She just squeezed my hand and said, "That explains why you're so self-sufficient." Then she paused and said, "It also explains why you apologize every time you ask me for a favor, which we're going to work on." I think that's the moment I knew she was a keeper. About 8 months after that Christmas visit, I got a call from Connor. This was unusual because Connor and I didn't really talk. We weren't hostile, we just existed in parallel. He called to tell me that Mom and Dad were planning a big 30th anniversary party and they wanted the whole family there. He said Mom specifically asked him to make sure I came because, and these were his words, she said, "You've been distant lately and she doesn't understand why." She doesn't understand why. Let that sink in for a second. The woman turned my bedroom into a craft room, and she doesn't understand why I might feel a little distant. But Claire encouraged me to go. She said it might be a chance to have an honest conversation. She offered to come with me for moral support, so I agreed. We flew to Ohio on a Friday afternoon and drove to my parents' house. The party was Saturday. We arrived Friday evening. Walking into that house with Claire was a different experience. She saw it immediately. I didn't even have to point it out. We were standing in the living room, and she was looking around, and I watched her face change as she realized what I told her was right there on the walls, on every shelf, in every frame. She looked at me with this expression that was equal parts heartbreak and fury, and she whispered, "Where are you in any of this?" I just shrugged. I'd had years to get used to it. The party was the next day. My parents had rented out the back room of a restaurant downtown. About 60 people showed up. Family, neighbors, friends from church. There was a slideshow playing on a projector screen. You want to take a wild guess how many photos of me were in that slideshow? Go ahead, guess. I'll wait. 3. Out of maybe 120 photos spanning 30 years of marriage and family life, I appeared in exactly 3. One was a group shot where I was partially blocked by a cousin. One was from my graduation where I was standing behind Connor. And one was a baby photo where you couldn't even tell it was me. Claire counted. She actually counted because she couldn't believe it. Connor appeared in probably 60 of them. I sat through that slideshow with a smile plastered on my face while 60 people ooh and ah at 30 years of the Connor show. Claire was gripping my hand under the table so hard I thought she might break a finger. After dinner, people were mingling. I stepped outside for some air. My mom followed me out. She had a glass of wine in her hand and she was smiling and she put her arm around me and said, "Isn't this wonderful? I'm so glad you came, Liam. You should come home more often. Why don't you ever come home anymore?" And there it was, the question delivered so casually like she genuinely had no idea. Like I was some puzzle she couldn't quite figure out, but also wasn't trying very hard to solve. Something cracked open inside me, not explosively quietly, like a fault line that had been building pressure for 29 years finally shifted. I said, "Mom, can we go inside for a second? I want to show you something." She looked confused, but she followed me. We walked back into the house through the side door that led into the kitchen. Claire was in the living room and she saw us, and she stood up. Connor was at the table with Ashley and the kids. I walked my mom to the fridge. I pointed at it. I said, "Look at this. Tell me what you see." She laughed nervously. She said, "What do you mean it's the fridge?" I said, "Look at what's on it. Connor's kid's drawing of a house. Connor's kid's drawing of the family, a photo of Connor's family, at the zoo, a magnet from Connor's vacation, his son's report card with your gold star sticker." She stared at the fridge like she was seeing it for the first time. I walked her to the corkboard. Connor's baseball schedule, a flyer from Connor's kids' school, play a photo of Connor and Ashley at some fundraiser. Then I walked her to the hallway. I pointed at every single frame. Connor's wedding, Connor's graduation, Connor's kids, Connor at Christmas, Connor with dad fishing, Connor. I turned to her and I said, "Show me one thing of mine. One photo, one drawing, one report card, one piece of evidence that I exist in this house." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She just stood there in the hallway with her wine glass and her mouth half open and absolutely nothing to say. I said I had straight A's for 12 years. I placed at regionals in swimming. I graduated with honors from college. I've been promoted twice in 3 years at my job. I'm in a relationship with an incredible woman, and there is not a single trace of any of it in the house I grew up in. My dad had walked over by then. He'd heard the tail end of it, and instead of acknowledging what I was saying, instead of looking around and seeing what was painfully obvious, he crossed his arms and said, "Liam, you're being dramatic. This is your mother's anniversary party. Don't ruin this, like I was the problem." Like pointing out that I'd been erased from my own family was some kind of social faux pas, like double dipping at the chip bowl. Claire stepped in. She looked at my dad and said with all due respect, "Greg, there are 3 photos of Liam in your 30-year slideshow." 3, I counted. That's not dramatic. That's devastating. The room got very quiet. Connor was staring at his plate. Ashley was looking at Connor like she wanted him to say something. My mom had tears in her eyes, but she still hadn't said a single word. I looked at my dad and I said, "I'm not ruining anything. You guys did that a long time ago. You just didn't notice because you were too busy watching Connor." Then I took Claire's hand and we walked out. We drove to the hotel in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat in the passenger seat and stared out the window while Claire drove and held my hand across the center console. We flew home the next morning. I turned my phone off for the entire flight. When I landed and turned it back on, I had 11 missed calls. 9 from my mom, 2 from Connor, 0 from my dad. Not a single one from the man who told me I was being dramatic. The weeks after the anniversary party were rough. Not in the way you'd expect, though. Nobody showed up at my door with an apology. Nobody sent a letter acknowledging what happened. Instead, I got a carefully curated campaign of guilt from my mother that would have impressed a professional lobbyist. The text started 2 days after I got home. "Liam, I don't understand why you'd embarrass me in front of our friends." Then a day later, "Liam, your father is very hurt." Then Liam, Connor says you were out of line. Then the masterpiece, "Liam, I'm your mother." I carried you for 9 months. The least you could do is pick up the phone. Funny how she could remember carrying me for 9 months but couldn't remember to put a single photo of me on her wall. That's selective memory operating at an Olympic level. I didn't respond to any of them. Claire helped me with that. She'd been a rock since the party, but she was also smart enough to know I needed professional help processing this, not just a supportive girlfriend. She encouraged me to start seeing a therapist, a guy named Dr. Reeves, who specialized in family dynamics and adult children of emotionally neglectful parents. Yes, that's an actual specialty. Turns out there are enough of us to keep these people employed full-time. Dr. Reeves was a game changer. He was this calm, measured guy in his 50s who had a way of reframing things that made my head spin. In our third session, he said something that stopped me cold. He said, "Liam, you've spent your entire life trying to earn a seat at a table that was never set for you. The table was always full. There was never an empty chair. You kept pulling up folding chairs from the garage and squeezing in at the corner, and they let you sit there because it didn't cost them anything. But they never made room." I sat with that for about a week. Then I cried in the shower for 45 minutes, which I don't recommend because the water gets cold, and then you're sad and shivering, which is just a terrible combination. But here's what happened after the crying. I got angry. Not the destructive kind of angry where you slash tires and send nasty emails. The productive kind. The kind that makes you look at your life and say, okay, I can't change them, but I can change everything about how I respond to this. I threw myself into work with a focus that honestly scared me a little. Scott, my boss, noticed immediately. He pulled me into his office one afternoon and said, "Whatever's fueling you right now, bottle it and sell it, because you're producing at a level I haven't seen from anyone in 10 years here." Within 6 months, I'd been promoted to senior analyst. Within a year after that, I was leading a team of 8 people managing portfolios worth more than I'd ever imagined touching at my age. Claire and I moved in together. We found this great townhouse in a neighborhood called Dilworth, close to restaurants and parks with a porch, where we'd sit on weekend mornings drinking coffee and talking about absolutely nothing in a way that felt like everything. She never pushed me to reconcile with my family. She never said you should forgive them, or they're still your parents, or any of that well-meaning but deeply unhelpful advice that people love to throw around. She just said, "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." And she meant it. I also started building what I call my real family. Not to replace anything, because you can't replace something you never had, but to create what I needed. Scott became a mentor and eventually a genuine friend. His wife Tara would invite us over for Sunday dinners, and it was the weirdest thing sitting at someone else's family table and being asked how my week was and having them actually listen to the answer. My buddy Jay from work and his wife Morgan became our closest friends. We do game nights and weekend hikes and stupid stuff like trivia at the bar down the street, where Claire and I would destroy everyone because she's a walking encyclopedia and I'm weirdly good at geography. I turned 30 and Claire threw me a surprise party. 15 people crammed into our townhouse with homemade food and a cake that said, "Happy birthday," to the guy who finally learned to stop apologizing for asking someone to pass the salt. It was a long cake. It was the first birthday party I'd ever had, where the focus was actually on me. I made a toast that night, and I thanked everyone for showing up, and I meant it on about 14 different levels that only Claire fully understood. During this time, I heard bits and pieces about my family through the occasional text from Connor. He'd reach out every couple months with these awkward surface-level messages. "Hey man, how's Charlotte?" or "Mom says hi." I'd respond politely but briefly. I wasn't interested in performing a relationship that didn't exist. From what I gathered, things weren't going great back in Ohio. Connor's coaching job was fine, but it wasn't exactly making anyone rich. Ashley had gone back to school part-time, which added stress. My parents were healthy, but my dad had retired, and they were figuring out how to live on a fixed income in a house that needed about $40,000 in repairs. The usual middle-class crumbling infrastructure that happens when you pour all your resources into one kid's baseball career and forget to fix the roof. I didn't gloat about any of this. I didn't feel satisfaction. I just noticed it the way you notice the weather report for a city you used to live in. Huh? Rain? Anyway, about 14 months after the anniversary party incident, I got a call from Connor that was different from his usual check-in texts. He actually called, which meant something was up. He hemmed and hawed for about 5 minutes before getting to the point. Mom and Dad were having money problems. The roof needed replacing. The furnace was shot. Dad's retirement savings weren't stretching as far as they'd planned. Connor was helping where he could, but he had 2 kids and a mortgage and Ashley's tuition to think about. He didn't directly ask me for money. He just laid out the situation and then said, "I just thought you should know." In that tone people use when they absolutely are asking but want plausible deniability. I told him I appreciated him letting me know and that I'd think about it. Then I hung up and sat on my porch and thought about it for exactly 11 seconds before deciding that I wasn't going to light my money on fire just because the people who forgot I existed finally needed something from me. I talked to Dr. Reeves about it. He said something interesting. He said the request itself isn't the problem. Families help each other. The problem is that there's been no acknowledgement, no accountability, and no change. Sending money now would communicate that the relationship can continue exactly as it was, and you're the one who'll pay the emotional and financial cost. So I didn't send money, and I didn't feel guilty about it, which was new. What I did instead was keep building. I got certified as a chartered financial analyst, which is one of those credentials that sounds boring but opens doors that are basically bolted shut otherwise. My firm offered me a position heading a new division focused on retirement planning and wealth management. It came with a significant raise and an office with an actual door, which after years of cubicle life felt like moving into a mansion. Claire and I got engaged on a Tuesday. Nothing fancy. We were cooking dinner, and I'd had the ring for 3 weeks and kept trying to plan the perfect moment. And then she burned the garlic and set off the smoke alarm, and we were standing in the kitchen waving a dish towel at the ceiling, laughing so hard we couldn't breathe, and I just blurted it out. She said yes before I even finished the sentence. It was perfect, because it was us. I was 31 years old. I had a career, I was proud of a woman, I was building a life with friends who showed up without being asked, and a therapist who taught me that I deserved all of it. I was genuinely happy. Not the performative kind where you post vacation photos and hope people think your life is together. The real kind. The kind where you wake up on a random Wednesday and think, yeah, this is good. And that's exactly when my mother decided she wanted back in. It started with a letter. Not a text, not a call, an actual handwritten letter mailed to my townhouse in Charlotte. My mom's handwriting on the envelope, the kind with the loopy cursive she always used for Christmas cards. Claire brought it in from the mailbox and set it on the kitchen counter, and we both stared at it like it was a suspicious package. I opened it that evening after dinner. It was 2 pages long. My mom wrote about how much she missed me, how the house felt empty without all her boys around, how of thinking. And she realized that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't always been fair. She said she wanted to make things right. She said she and Dad wanted to come visit me in Charlotte. She said she'd been praying about it and God told her it was time to heal. Now I want to be clear about something. I'm not cynical enough to dismiss a parent's attempt at reconciliation automatically. People can change. People do grow, and part of me, that little kid who just wanted his mom to come to his swim meet, perked up when I read that letter. Claire saw it on my face. She put her hand on my arm and said, "You don't have to decide anything tonight." So I sat with it. I talked to Dr. Reeves about it. He was cautiously supportive. He said the letter is a good sign, but words are easy. What matters is whether behavior changes. He suggested that if I decided to engage, I should set clear boundaries and watch for patterns rather than promises. I wrote back a short letter. I said I appreciated her reaching out. I said I'd be open to a visit, but I wanted to be honest that things couldn't just go back to the way they were. I said I needed acknowledgement that what happened at the anniversary party wasn't me being dramatic. It was me finally being honest about something that had hurt for a very long time. 2 weeks later, my mom called. She was emotional. She said she understood. She said she and Dad wanted to come down the following month. She said they'd get a hotel so they wouldn't impose. She said Connor wanted to come too and bring the family, make it a whole thing. I paused at that. Connor wanting to come felt less like reconciliation and more like delusion. If the whole family was there, the conversation I needed to have with my parents would get buried under kid chaos and small talk. I told my mom that I'd love to see Connor separately, but for this first visit, I wanted it to be just her and Dad. She agreed, though I could hear the hesitation in her voice. They came on a weekend in late October. I picked them up from the airport. My dad shook my hand. My mom hugged me so tight I could feel her shaking. We drove to my place and I gave them a tour, and my mom kept saying how nice everything was, and my dad nodded along like he was inspecting for code violations. Claire kept the conversation flowing through lunch. Light stuff, easy stuff, giving everyone a chance to warm up. The real conversation came Saturday evening. Claire had tactfully excused herself to meet Morgan, giving us privacy. We were sitting on the back patio. My dad had a beer, my mom had wine. I had water because I wanted my head crystal clear. I started by thanking them for coming. Then I asked my mom a direct question. I said, Mom, when I walked you through the house at the anniversary party and asked you to show me one thing of mine, what did you feel in that moment? She took a long sip of wine. Then she said she felt ambushed. Ambushed. Not ashamed, not guilty, not heartbroken that her son felt invisible. Ambushed, like I was the opposing counsel in a courtroom drama. I kept my composure. Dr. Reeves and I had practiced this. I said I understand it felt sudden, but I'm asking what you felt about what I showed you, not how I showed it. The fact that there's nothing of mine in your home. She started to cry. I genuinely believed the tears were real, but they were for her own discomfort, not for my pain. There's a difference that took me years to understand. She said, I love you just as much as Connor. I've always loved you both the same. I said, I believe you think that's true, but love isn't just a feeling, Mom. It's a verb. It's what you do. And what you did was build a museum to Connor's life and turn my bedroom into a sewing room. My dad set his beer down. He cleared his throat and said, Look, Liam, your mother and I aren't perfect. We know that, but you've done well for yourself. You're successful. You don't need us the way Connor does. Connor stayed close. He needed the support and we gave it. That's what parents do. I stared at him for a solid 5 seconds. Then I said, Dad, are you hearing yourself? You're saying you invested in the kid who stayed and ignored the kid who left, and you don't see how that might be the reason I left. He didn't have an answer for that. He just kind of blinked and picked his beer back up. My mom jumped in. She said, We want to fix this. Tell us what you need. We'll do it. In a movie, this is where the music swells and everyone hugs and the credits roll. But this isn't a movie. I'd learned enough from Dr. Reeves to know that fix this doesn't happen over one patio conversation. It happens over months of consistent change behavior. So I told them what I needed. I need you to acknowledge specifically that you treated me differently, not just we weren't perfect. I need you to say you prioritized Connor and you know that hurt me. I need you to stop calling me dramatic. And I need to see actual change, not promises. I need to see me in your house, on your walls, in your conversations. And I need time. My mom nodded. My dad said that's fair. They left on Sunday. The goodbye was warmer than the arrival. My mom held me at the door and said, I'm going to try Liam. I really am. I wanted to believe her. Part of me did, but I told Claire afterward that I was going to watch and wait because people who are used to putting in zero effort don't become marathon runners overnight. Over the next few months, I watched. My mom called more often. She asked about my job. She asked about Claire and the wedding planning. She even asked about my friends by name, which was new. But there were cracks. She'd still spend the first 10 minutes of every call updating me on Connor and his kids before asking about me. She still hadn't put a single photo of me up in the house. I knew because Connor mentioned it casually in a text, said the hallway still looked the same. My dad was worse. He called once and it lasted 3 minutes. He said, your mother wanted me to check in, not I wanted to check in. Your mother wanted me to. He asked about work. I told him about my promotion, and he said good for you, which is what you say to a stranger's kid at a company picnic, not your own son who just landed the biggest opportunity of his career. Then Connor called me about 6 months into this so-called reconciliation, and everything shifted. He was being weirdly formal, which with Connor meant something uncomfortable was coming. He finally got to it. Mom and Dad were talking about updating their estate plan. They wanted to leave the house to Connor since he lived nearby and his kids had grown up visiting. They planned to split their savings evenly between us. But the house, which was worth considerably more than the savings, would go entirely to Connor. He said they asked him to tell me. They asked him to tell me. They couldn't even deliver this news themselves. They outsourced the conversation about cutting me out of the biggest asset in their estate to the brother who was getting everything. I thanked Connor for telling me. Then I hung up and called Claire and told her to come home. And when she walked through the door, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open and a legal pad full of notes. I looked at her and said, they haven't changed. And she sat down next to me and said, I know. So what's the plan? I said, I'm done asking for a seat at their table. I'm going to build my own table. And when they figure out what they've lost, that's going to be the consequence I never had the power to deliver before. The first thing I did was consult a lawyer. Not to contest the estate plan because legally my parents could leave their assets to a golden retriever if they wanted. I wanted to understand my position. The attorney, a sharp woman named Rebecca, said honestly, Liam, from a financial standpoint, you don't need their house. What you need is closure. She was right, but closure doesn't come from other people handing it to you. You build it yourself. Claire and I set a wedding date. We planned a beautiful ceremony at a venue in the mountains outside Asheville. Intimate 70 people. Our friends, Claire's family, a few cousins from my dad's side. I did not invite my parents. I didn't make some grand announcement about it. I just didn't send them an invitation. Claire's parents asked once gently, and Claire handled it. She said, "We want our wedding day to be about joy, not tension." They respected that and never brought it up again. Connor found out through one of our cousins. He called me flustered. He said, "Mom is going to lose her mind." I said, "That's not my problem to manage anymore." He got quiet. Then he said, "Do you want me there?" I said, "Yeah, but I need you to come as my brother, not as Mom and Dad's representative." He said, "Okay." And to his credit, he meant it. My mom found out 3 weeks before the wedding. She called in a state I can only describe as weaponized grief. "How could you do this to me? A mother deserves to see her son get married. Your father and I have been trying so hard." I let her finish. Then I said, "Mom, you've had 6 months since that visit to Charlotte to put one photo of me in your house. Have you done it?" Silence. I said, "You've had 6 months to call me without spending the first 10 minutes talking about Connor. Have you done that?" More silence. I said, "Dad still hasn't called me once on his own. You asked Connor to tell me about the estate plan instead of telling me yourself. You said you wanted to fix this and then changed nothing. I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting my joy. There's a difference." She said, "You're going to regret this, Liam. You'll want your mother there someday, and it'll be too late." I said, "Maybe, but I've spent 29 years regretting that my mother wasn't there. At swim meets, at graduation, at birthdays. At least this time it's my choice." She hung up. My dad didn't call. The wedding was perfect. Not perfect in the Instagram way where every detail is curated. Perfect in the way that matters. Where every person there genuinely wanted to be there. Claire walked down the aisle and I completely lost it, which I'd sworn I wouldn't do. And Jake handed me a tissue and whispered, "You owe me $20. Scott gave a toast that made everyone cry. Connor pulled me aside during the reception and said, "I'm proud of you, man. This is really good." And I think he meant it in a way that went beyond just the wedding. Claire's dad told me he was glad his daughter found someone who understood that love is a verb. I don't think he knew how deeply that landed. The aftermath was interesting. My mom sent a card. No apology, just congratulations, and a line about how she wished she could have been there. My dad sent nothing. But here's where the irony really kicks in. About 4 months after the wedding, I got a call from Connor. He sounded exhausted. Mom and Dad's financial situation had gotten worse. The roof was actively leaking. The furnace had given up, and they were heading into an Ohio winter with almost no savings left. Connor had been covering what he could, but he was stretched thin with 2 kids, a mortgage, and Ashley's tuition. He said, "Mom asked me to call you." And then he paused, and I heard something in his voice I'd never heard before. He said, "Liam, I know that's not fair. I know they keep asking me to be the middleman, and I know that's messed up. I just don't know what else to do." This was the moment. The parents who built a shrine to one son and erased the other now needed the erased son to save their house. I told Connor I'd handle it. Then I called my parents directly. My mom answered, and she immediately started with the small talk. "Oh, Liam, so nice to hear from you. How's Claire? How's the weather in Charlotte?" I cut through it. I said, "Mom, I know about the house. I know about the money situation. Put Dad on speaker." She did. I could hear him breathing. I said, "I'm going to be honest with you both. I have the means to help, so this isn't a question of whether I can. It's a question of whether I will. And before you say anything, I want you to listen. I said you plan to leave the house entirely to Connor because he stayed close and I moved away. You never considered that I moved away because there was nothing here for me. You couldn't even tell me about the estate plan yourselves. You sent Connor to deliver the news like I was a tenant being notified about a lease change." My dad started to say something. I said, "I'm not done, Dad." And he stopped. I think it was the first time in my life I'd ever told my father to be quiet. I said, "Mom, you wrote me a letter saying you wanted to heal. You visited Charlotte and cried on my patio and said you tried. Then you went home and changed nothing. Not one photo, not one phone call that didn't start with Connor. You did the bare minimum and expected me to be grateful. I said the house you want me to save is the same house where my bedroom became a craft room while Connor stayed a shrine. You want me to fund the preservation of a monument to your favoritism?" Dead silence. The kind of silence that has weight to it. Then my mom said, "You're right. 2 words. No deflection. No, but we love you both the same. No, you're being dramatic. Just, you're right." My dad said it too quieter. He said, "We messed up, Liam. I know we did. I sat there on my porch in Charlotte and felt something release in my chest that I'd been carrying since I was a kid, standing in a parking lot with a bronze medal and no ride home. I said, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to help with the house. Not because I owe you, but because I'm choosing to. And that choice comes with conditions. A real written apology from both of you. Photos of me in that house framed in the hallway wherever Connor's are. The estate plan updated to reflect both sons equally. And Dad calls me every other week, not because Mom told him to, but because he wants to. My dad said, okay. I said, one more thing. I want you at my house for Thanksgiving, not Connor's mine. You're going to sit at my table in my home with my wife and my friends, and you're going to see what I've built without you. Not to rub it in, but so you finally see me. My mom was crying again, but it was different this time. I could hear it in her voice. This wasn't, I'm uncomfortable crying. This was, I finally understand what I did crying. She said, we'll be there. They came for Thanksgiving. Claire cooked a turkey that was unreasonably good. Scott and Tara came. Jake and Morgan came. My parents sat at a table full of people who loved me and watched me be the person I'd become without their help. My dad was quiet most of the night, but when he left, he hugged me, not a handshake, a hug. And he said, I'm sorry I missed all of this. I'm sorry I missed you. That was 6 months ago. Things aren't perfect. My mom still catches herself defaulting to Connor talk, but now she stops mid-sentence and says, sorry. Tell me about your week. My dad calls every other Sunday. The conversations are short and awkward, but they're real. The hallway in their house now has my college graduation photo, my wedding photo, and a picture of me and Claire on our porch. It's not equal to Connor's wall of fame, but it's there. Connor and I are closer than we've ever been. He came to Charlotte last month with the family, and his son asked what I did for work. I told him I help people count their money. He said, cool, can you count mine? He had $2.37. I counted it very seriously and told him his portfolio was performing well. The estate plan was updated, equal split everything including the house. My mom handed me the paperwork herself. She said, this is how it should have been from the start. I framed a copy of my old bronze medal from the regional swim meet. It's hanging in my home office. Claire asked me why, since I have nicer accomplishments to display. I told her it's not about the medal. It's about the kid who won it and stood alone in the parking lot. I hung it there so that kid knows someone finally showed up for him. And that someone was me.